Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends, I'm back today with another character preview for the newest Adeptus Mechanicus character to come to the game, Exitor-Rho, the Skitarii Rustwalker. Before I get too far into that, a quick announcement for the recent giveaway winners. To the winners pictured on screen, please drop me a message on Discord to claim your prizes. For those of you who missed out on the giveaway, don't worry, I frequently do giveaways and have in-game codes for you all to use, so just make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future opportunities. The Skitarii Rustwalkers are the cybernetic assassins that the Adeptus Mechanicus legions use. They are constructed from the mortally wounded bodies of fallen Skitarii, and the painful and traumatic transformation that they have to undergo causes them to become psychologically unstable warriors who are intent on killing their enemies. This background feeds well into how Snowprint have designed the character. First up, we can take a look at Exitor-Rho on the character screen. It's a gorgeous character model as usual. He's holding two transonic blades and he's got the sort of spiked scorpion tail that feeds into his active ability, Cord Claw. In terms of traits, we can see the mechanical trait that has been consistent across the AdMech faction, Camouflage, which reduces damage taken at range, Infiltrate, as well as the Unstoppable trait, which allows him to bypass fire, razor wire, or broken ice that would otherwise normally be a hindrance to movement. Stats here are pictured on screen at Diamond 2, and I'll go into how this scales and compares to other characters in the game later on in the infographic. Crucially, he's got a movement of 4, which puts him in the upper tier of characters when it comes to movement. He only has one melee attack, and that's an energy attack at 2 hits. We can remind ourselves that energy does a 30% pierce ratio. Items are pictured on screen with a melee weapon and a crit booster, as well as a defensive stat item. Next up, we can take a look at his active ability, Cord Claw. Now this does a direct hit attack against an adjacent enemy, and then it also empowers Exitor-Rho's future attacks with an additional 2 times direct damage hits until the end of its next turn. So in terms of how this plays out, he does an attack against an adjacent enemy, then all of his remaining attacks for that turn get this bonus 800 to 1200 direct damage, as well as all of Exitor-Rho's attacks on the following turn also get this second bonus damage. And that feeds into his passive ability, which is Optimized Gate. It says that whenever an enemy is adjacent to Exitor-Rho and is attacked by another friendly mechanical unit, Exitor-Rho does an energy attack at 2 hits. Now this can trigger multiple times every turn, and the second part of this ability says that if that enemy is defeated by Exitor-Rho, then he moves into the empty space and can continue to use this attack against any other enemies. I'll show you how this all feeds into gameplay footage shortly. So in this clip I'm going to be demonstrating Exitor's active and passive abilities in action. For a bit of context, what I've actually done is I've just downscaled both the active and the passive to a very low level so that my meat shields don't die too quickly. And for the same reason, Vitruvius Thanek as well as Shozil are equally downscaled. We'll start by moving Exitor into melee range against one of these targets. Vitruvius Thanek follows closely behind and starts with an attack. This attack procs Exitor-Rho's passive ability Optimized Gate, and you can see those 2 extra hits at quite low damage on Bellator. Next up, we move Shozil into position to also an attack using his drone, and you can see that the passive can trigger multiple times on the same turn against the same target. We'll skip ahead a bit and look at Exitor-Rho using his active ability Cord Claw on Typhus. As we cycle through the turn and we have a look at how the mechanical units attack on a subsequent turn, you can see that Cord Claw is actually giving bonus hits to every attack that his allied mechanical units make. Each of the attacks that Exitor-Rho is now making out of turn is actually doing a total of 4 hits, the 2 hits from the passive as well as the additional 2 hits from his active ability. One of the questions I got asked was whether or not this passive ability can trigger multiple times against different targets in the same turn, and to demonstrate that I've taken Vitruvius Thanek and moved him up into this position on the left high ground in order for him to use his active ability on Bellator and Typhus. Rad Bombardment damages all enemies in a line, and in theory this should also trigger Exitor-Rho's passive ability on both enemies. Gameplay footage demonstrating that to good effect. We can also see some interesting nuance with Thutmose, who is a mechanical Necron character. When Thutmose uses his active ability on 4 targets, Exitor-Rho seems to prefer moving into the empty hex rather than attacking enemy units with his passive ability. At the end of this clip, we can look at Sho killing off Typhus, and now Exitor-Rho uses his passive ability to enter the empty vacated hex. One of the questions I got asked was, how does Exitor-Rho interact with bosses like Ghazghkull? And we'll remind ourselves that Ghazghkull has a very special trait called Prophet of Gork and Mork. Now this threshold moves depending on how many boss primes you kill, but essentially after being attacked a certain number of times, Ghazghkull takes a reduced amount of damage until the end of that turn, and that's evidenced visually by a small shield that pops up over the boss character. Let's see how that interacts with this character. So Exitor-Rho is going to move into position and use his active abilities first of all, and that's hit number 1. Hit number 2 comes in the form of Shozil, again triggering both hit number 2 from the drone as well as possibly hit number 3 from the character itself. Now we'll move up and do hit number 4 with Tangira. We can see straight away that after hit number 4 we have this shield popping up, suggesting that Ghazghkull is now affected by Prophet of Gork and Mork. The takeaway here is that this passive ability counts as an attack just like any other attack otherwise would. In this next clip, I'm hoping to demonstrate how Exitor-Rho's passive ability triggers on bosses like Rogal Dorn. Now, we'll remind ourselves about Rogal Dorn's abilities here, and there's one called Gunner's Kill on Sight that sets this red area that you can currently see on screen that only disappears after the Rogal Dorn battle tank has taken enough critical hits. So what we'll do is we'll move Exitor-Rho behind the tank, and then we'll start attacking it with mechanical units. So hit number 1, and we can see crit number 1. Hit number 2, oops, crit number 2, and then hit number 3, crit number 3, and that shuts off Rogal Dorn's area of effect attack. So it looks like triggering crits through his passive ability still counts for shutting off the Rogal Dorn's Gunner's Kill on Sight. In this clip, what I hope to demonstrate to you is how Exitor-Rho I think will be optimally used, and that is against these boss primes with the boss adjutant trait. We'll remind ourselves that boss adjutant means that the prime boss initially takes a reduced amount of damage, but at the end of each turn that unit loses 1% of its current health each time it was attacked. That makes them particularly susceptible to Exitor-Rho, who has optimized gate and with the right setup and composition can possibly trigger several extra attacks every single turn. Now, I haven't particularly practiced this setup, but we'll see how it plays out against Nauseous Rotbon at the current legendary boss level. In the interest of keeping this clip and video to an appropriate length, I've just sped up the rest of this gameplay footage. What we're looking at here is once Exitor-Rho gets into position, we set up a summon army that triggers lots and lots and lots of out of turn damage. This boss prime starts the battle with just under 700,000 health, and over the course of the fight we can see that whittled down through all the summons and out of turn damage, all triggering boss adjutant for that extra chunk of damage that's lost every single turn. By now you'll get the gist of what's going on here, and I'll just cut ahead to show you the final damage done by this team. There you go, 550,000 damage as a solo hitter against a boss without much practice. On this screen you can see the character infographic that I've created. What I like about Exitor-Rho is that Snowprint are showing an interest in creating good synergy and alternative strategies for you to use. We've already seen the Psyker team in action in previous videos, and now we have what looks like the linchpin for the mechanical team. If you want to use him, it's going to be important to upgrade both the active and passive abilities to really make the most out of that out of turn damage. I think he'll be good, but will require heavy investment. On this corner of the infographic, you can see the character stats and how they measure up against others in the game, courtesy of Tauan and his math. Exitor has fairly average defensive stats, with health in the 50th centile and armor in the 36th centile. His damage is also fairly middling at the 50th centile, but probably feeds into the fact that he actually does most of his damage out of turn through his active and passive abilities. That's all I've got for today, and for this character showcase. If you've enjoyed this video and my content, please consider entering my referral code as seen on screen. It earns you 100 Blackstone and supports me in the work that I do. It is single use though, so choose who you support wisely. Finally, if you're interested in joining a competitive cluster, then drop by the Eye of Terror Discord via the link in the video description below. Bye for now.
Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi.